Hi, I'm Micah.
Hi, I'm Christa.
And this is Bad People.
Okay, so today is kind of our origin stories and kind of getting into, why do we exist? How did we come to be? And for me, so I'm an adopted kid. I was born in 1985, which now is starting to seem like, oh wow, the 80s. Yeah, that's a while ago.
80s, 90s.
Yeah, like you're a 90s kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, 1985. I was born in Venezuela, so that's the top of South America.
Good, I need that geography.
I know, right? Yeah, it's like Venezuela.
Where I know the name, but
yeah, like where is that?
Yeah.
How I came to exist. So my birth father was the lore that as it goes. So he was a captain of a freighter ship. So kind of funny, being a port city in Vancouver, we see all those freighter ships like always in our harbor. Yeah, and I was always told that he was the captain of one of those. And so he would travel to different countries and bring goods. And one of those countries happened to be Venezuela. And that's where he met my birth mother. The interesting thing about him, so Norwegian guy, and he actually had multiple families. So he had 3 daughters and a wife previously in Norway. And then while he was engaged to be married to my birth mother, he also had a family in Jacksonville in the States. And while he was engaged to be married to my birth mother, he had I think something like a 2-year-old daughter. And then also his wife was pregnant. So he actually like had just a whole family. And then
so one in Jacksonville and one in
Norway. So I believe like the Norwegian family, he had been divorced from them, I think. I don't know. Like never met him. I've seen like a few photos of him, but he's not, it doesn't exist in my life.
Yeah.
As it goes, my birth mother didn't know about this family. And so, or the one that he was married to and had children with. And then, so promises were made to her. And so I guess, they were a few months out from their wedding. And so, it was told to me that I was conceived out of love, which is interesting. Again, like I am part of like an open adoption. So I've always known my birth mother. So these are how these stories have come to be my story or part of what I know.
Yeah. What age were you when you were?
Adopted. So full like fresh out of the.
Okay.
Yeah. So
she knew she wanted to put you up for adoption.
Yeah. So like in Latin culture, so once she found out that her fiance, my birth father, she at some point found out that he had another family, and she called off
during her pregnancy.
Called off the wedding. And then was left, obviously, pregnant. And that was not her plan to, be an unwed mother. And, in Latin culture, super Catholic. And, you don't really, everyone's sort of like having sex, but no one talks about it. It's like,
just don't talk about it.
Exactly. They're so passionate, that culture. But anyways, so her family, they had wanted her to just get an abortion. She was part of like a relatively affluent family in Venezuela. Like it's a very, the classes there. So we talk about this. You're either like more on like the poorer side, or you're sort of like an affluent kind of part of society. So there's not really that middle class as much. She would have probably been more of the middle class, but definitely, just they had some political involvement and stuff. So
oh wow,
anyways, and so she found herself pregnant. Her family was just like, no, you should get an abortion. So quite a few people were pressuring her that way, and she just knew that. I think that's not what she wanted. And so her aunt and uncle were here in Canada and like ambassadors or something like that. And my mom, my mom who adopted me, was an ESL teacher and was randomly teaching them ESL.
Okay.
And so
teaching her relative.
And so they had like somehow my mom, who was like, She's 40, single, never married. She was talking to them and had shared like she's thinking about trying to adopt a child. And so this just like kind of one of those, like, it was always explained to me like God moments.
Yeah.
And so, excuse me. So then, somehow they were working it all out, which is funny to think all of that happening in like, 6 months or something like that. Like it was just kind of a short timeline. So, my mom flew there and was there when I was born. And so there was like, they became friends, which was really cool. And they, I want to say had like a decent relationship and was just, it's kind of interesting to think back because I think all the best intentions to sort of keep the lines of communication open and this understanding of like, trying to bring healing or even for health concerns and stuff. A lot of adopted kids just have no clue about that stuff. So those are kind of the idealistic, starting points of that sort of complicated relationship. And that's like, as it grew, and as I grew, that became something that was very complicated for me to sort of process. Again, when I was a child, I was like, wow, like it was always again explained to me, like, be proud that you're adopted.
Yeah.
I'll always tell you you're adopted. But it was really interesting to process seeing the pain or just the brokenness that existed and that my existence, like, okay, so I came out of something that was traumatic and a broken situation and that there was fracturing there and that because of that, I am here and that, stories were sort of shared like this to me and trying to figure out, okay, how do I interact with those things? So my birth mother would have come when I was 2. She came to visit when I was 7 and when I was 12. And that's
quite a long time between.
Between visits, but they were always like these big kind of moments. And like in there, my mother and her would keep in contact. And when I was 2, things were fine. But then that relationship really started to break down.
Their relationship.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was interesting.
You know why? Or
regret, I think, is what was explained to me.
So on your birth mother's.
Yeah. So she ended up getting married when I was 2 years old.
Oh, okay.
And I think maybe found herself in a more stable relationship. And I think at that point had wanted to maybe explore this, like, could she come back? And of course, my mom didn't adopt me to temporarily have a child.
Yeah.
And so that was hard.
Yeah.
For them both to process, I think.
Yeah.
And interesting as I grew, like obviously at 2, you have no clue, but then at 7, you definitely start to see that there's like this nuanced kind of thing and
some tension.
Yeah. And then there would be like fighting on phones or, I want to talk and then comes the sort of the question of is love or is blood thicker than water? That sort of thing, which is funny. That quote. Have you ever heard that quote?
I have, yeah.
But do you know that there's the other side of that quote?
No.
So it actually doesn't mean what we say it to mean is like
we usually say it as in like families, priority kind of thing.
But it's not. It's it has like the second part of it is
it's so funny, those cultural things and phrases that we just hear so often quoted to us, and it becomes a part of your like upbringing. And it's like, who actually said that? And what was the initial context?
And it's funny because this is one of the one of the most famously misquoted phrases.
Quotes. Yeah.
This isn't a podcast. Trevor Noah Heidi sent this to me actually.
Oh, yeah, I love that one. I've only listened to a couple of episodes, but I like, really cool. Same idea, too, of like real conversations. And
the actual quote, we just looked it up, so we always say it is, blood is thicker than water, but the quote is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, which is actually saying the exact opposite of
referring to like the
Jesus
sacrifice kind
of ish, but also like the covenant or like the like water of the womb, like that like those family bonds.
Yeah.
That is one thing, but it's actually like a covenant that is chosen.
Yeah.
Which is what Jesus would have done for us, obviously. Like he chose this thing. But that would be a more meaningful bond or covenant.
Yeah.
Right.
Then familial bonds. Yeah.
Which is funny because that is like a theme of my entire life. Like that was always, I think my birth mother tried to use that. And my mother was very like fearful of that would always be true, that she would never fully be my mother, and that I would always feel this tie to my birth mother, which was always kind of explained to me as a child, and kind of like, do you love me? Like always these questions, which again, understanding our parents as human, which we talk about a little bit, like, and trying to give them the grace that they deserve. Okay, of course, you'd always need that reassurance. Just very tricky as a child to be giving a parent reassurance.
Yeah.
And then also, trying to navigate what is true, right? When you're being told these things and you're really conflicted because you see everybody's saying like, oh, how loved and how chosen you are. And oh, that God like plucked you out of like, a third world country and brought you into like a Christian home, and a home that has like security and money and safety. And then when you're feeling about that, like you're in your body and your gut feelings that like something maybe is a bit amiss here, and maybe, like all these things that I should be grateful for. Like it was always a theme, as well as this. Now I look at it and I'm like, ooh, that's like that toxic gratitude. Like when I think back to like the earliest emotion or feeling that was sort of told to me is like, you should be so grateful. And then always sort of being like, oh, I'm so grateful to even exist. I'm so thankful that she chose to give me life. I'm so thankful that my mother, flew all the way to Venezuela out of great personal expense and time and all this to bring me to Canada. Of course, I should be thankful. Of course, like those are amazing things, but to always have that, you become quite fatigued with that.
Totally.
I like realizing as an adult, but that was a huge theme.
Yeah.
I owed God a lot. I owed my mother. Always owing people, which was an interesting thing too.
Yeah. And the gratitude even. Like, to be thankful. You're kind of obliged to be thankful.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say for most, obviously not all, like you... And maybe you don't feel like this. So pardon me if I'm speaking a turn, but most people don't have to say, oh, I'm so thankful I exist. Yeah. Like you're just like, my parents chose to have me. And like, it's just a given. Yeah. So that's just been,
it's a lot for
it. Yeah. And especially in like those years of being, like I want to say like, this kind of like the moments when she would come being 7 and then 12, and then again I saw her at 19 being more of an adult. But
so what were your feelings each like?
Oh man, I
mean, so you were obviously told from young that you were adopted. So like, do you remember like wondering about your mom and your family in Venezuela?
A little bit.
Were you kind of just like immersed as children are too, like in your immediate life? And
they always say, like children are little like narcissists, right? So like, of course it's all about like what you're experiencing in the here and now. But then when she would come to visit, those were those moments where you're like reminded that, oh right, I don't fit. Or if somebody would say to me, because my mom being 40 years older, there was like, just sort of the visual that, oh, she's an older mom. Yeah. Which my mom would take very personally.
Okay.
Something that she couldn't control, which I always felt bad for. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. This injures you and that you feel sensitive about this. And I always would try to like overcompensate, or people would say, either they would say, oh, you look like her. Yeah. Because they didn't know what to say. Like there was always like, oh, you're so exotic. Yeah. You probably get that, right?
The exotic.
Or maybe you do now that you're in Canada.
Oh, I got
that. I just, then you don't quite fit in and somebody can't quite put why the picture looks a little off.
Yeah.
And
and then that life. Yeah. People are struggling with what to say, right? Just where these kinds of funny things come out of. Yeah.
And you hear that all the time. And then when it's always like, I didn't have siblings growing up. I didn't have, like, my mother never got married. And so it's just the two of us.
Yeah.
People are always trying to place us and just try to understand the story. And it's sort of genuine, like, curiosity or like that innocence.
Yeah.
When you consistently hear like the same things.
Totally.
So, yeah, again, I did always think that exotic one because I got that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm like, look that different. Like but yeah, apparently, for most people, I would have. And yeah, again, just them trying to place it in process out loud. And you're like, it's okay to keep those things to yourself. Whatever.
Totally.
Yeah. And then when she would come, obviously I looked similar to my birth mother. And and then
so did you kind of like see that as well as you got older?
For sure.
Yeah.
It was like, because there was so much tension between like the two mothers. That was just challenging because, you know, you'd sort of see that and try to honor that and then have like guilt around any sort of like, oh, if there was that was injuring for my adopted. Yeah. All of that trying to process, but then also really having to hold my own feelings
suppress
those
them
things
in a way.
Exactly. To manage how everyone else is feeling. And
that's a lot.
It is. Like now looking back, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I would encourage. I think I would say pretty openly, open adoption is like a tricky process for
where
people.
the parents stay in contact. I can imagine.
Unless there's like really great therapy or and having both. Like my mom not being married and not having that support in her life. I think
another person to
really to kind of reassure and go, you're always her mother, of course. Because you do need that. Like that. Like this.
You need validation or reassurance.
Yes.
You.
So it's kind of tricky.
Yeah.
And then obviously like having God sprinkled in the mix there and going to church, like it's funny again with that kind of lore of like stories being told to you about your existence. Like my mom, like on the plane ride home, like some witch had like put like a pin on me or something. Because I don't know if you find that in your culture, but like witchcraft or some of that kind of like more of the occult stuff sometimes exists in like island culture or like African or Latin America. Like that seems to be really prevalent. And just randomly, like my birth family is not attached to that, but this like person on an airplane, I don't know why. Like that's so strange. And that was the thing that caused my mom to become like, well, for one, she super knew that was like there's something up there, and then she got right into going to church and just really understanding like, oh no, if I'm going to raise this child on my own and I don't have a partner in life, I need the backing and support of a community. And a really cool thing in the Bible is like God is the fatherless or the father to the fatherless. Right. And so she just preached that, but like in a really like loving and tender way, which I've always felt like greatly connected to God because of that.
Yes. That's cool.
Nice. But also, just lots of questions as you're a child and like trying to process these things authentically and then, trying to navigate through a lot. So. But church was always felt safe. I think something we maybe have in common is, my mother's mental health wasn't always, it's hard to talk about these things in a respectful way. But from my perspective, felt very chaotic. And from my perspective, I would say that my mother struggled greatly with depression and with emotional regulation and really was distraught by any sort of normal childhood behavior, like simple things like not doing dishes or, childhood, just like nothing crazy, but rebellion. And so I felt the pressure to be good and to change my true feelings into what was palatable for her. Because
what you were expected to.
And to just really manage like, oh, if she was having an off day, that was typically directly a cause because of something I had done. So that's tricky. And then church for me, because always growing up and going to church felt like a safe place or a reprieve or a little bit of an outlet and a look into what normal other healthy families looked like. And of course, church is a great place where everybody kind of puts on like their best like foot forward, right? Everybody's dressed to the nines, especially in that 20 years ago, like where everybody kind of made it look perfect. And so I would go and see these families that looked whole. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's what Christianity or what God's intention for us is. And I happen to come from a broken situation, which I should be so grateful that I'm here, but oh, look what I can kind of aspire to. And I think having sort of a chaotic experience at home, my mom would never, like, that wasn't her intention, but it's just the pressure of being a single parent. And I think totally lost her mom. Like, my grandmother was very involved in my life but she died when I was 7, and so she, when she passed, like being there and like seeing her, just like all these tricky moments and really sad moments. And then it's funny because when I think about something that I struggle with now is deception, like a lot. We kind of talked about kind of the weird place that I found myself in life. But I remember kind of how lies came to be in my life. And it was kind of like what I was saying, like managing how I truly felt and then changing that to help somebody else feel better. But I remember one of the big ones was seeing my grandmother, like, because we visited her after she died, and then knowing that she was dead and seeing how sad my mother was, like her whole life fell apart. Not having that support anymore.
Were they quite close?
So close. Like, she helped raise me. Like, pick me up when my mom was working and babysit me and stuff.
Very involved.
Very. And then having to, or I didn't have to, I chose to tell her a story about my grandmother, like calling me back and telling me she loved me right before she died. And then telling me some story about every time we see a leaf falling, that was her telling us that she loved us or something. And these were stories that I totally made up. But to try and make my mother feel better because she was in so much pain. Such emotional, again, instability. And it's funny because I did that my whole life. And just really tried to help her and just be so aware of like how not okay she was. And I really felt like it was always because of something I had done. And it's not like an internalizing, kids do that. But there was a lot of like, that was explained to me after childhood. Oh, I'm not okay because this has gone wrong. And yet, if I performed well, like I was in a million activities, dance and softball and all those things, and if I did the right things, I also had the power to make her happy and make her proud and bring her joy. But it's really specific.
That's a lot to be juggling.
And a lot of fear around like men or boys coming into my life, and a lot of like, kind of like, if you have sex, I won't love you anymore, or things like that as I became a teenager. And more chaos.
Lots of conditions.
Exactly. And the plot just kind of continued to unravel. And so youth group would have been, again, a very safe place to, just kind of find reprieve and
hang out and be
totally
a young person.
So again, very much needed to escape the chaos. And I mean, the kind of it got to a point where like sleeping in a park like at night became a reality because it was just better to be out in a quiet place. Or
it's crazy.
So, and again, nothing, it was more of the emotional toll of that chaos. So it's being so that would have been my up until like 18, and then I left home at 18 and just sort of not in the middle of the night, but that kind of idea like, okay, gotta get out. It was not a blessed leaving. It was I need to go and go and live on my own, which was a lot at 18 to kind of take on. And again, all in there still trying to manage to respect my mother and love her and understand why things were like this. Very much like not understanding why I was such a problem. So anyways, that's a very long story. but I will end
so much. So much in there though.
anyways. Yeah.
Okay. Just like interesting hearing more of your
Yeah.
origin.
Yeah. And trying to like piece it together and go, because you kind of get to a point you're like, yeah, that kind of happened, but then actually articulating it and going, oh yeah, like what was that like?
Yeah.
I think very marked by chaos, but then also, but not in like the traditional sense. Like, you hear of people, again, like I think that's hard to understand chaos because, drug use or alcohol abuse or something like that's a chaotic childhood.
Yeah.
When emotional instability, like why would that be chaotic?
Yeah.
Why would it be chaotic to have a birth mother come and visit? Like, that sounds not that bad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I feel like unless you have experienced that, it can be,
Yeah, it's just
tricky to understand.
totally. And it's like, again, I don't know if you kind of gaslight yourself ever, but I do that where it's like, oh, it's not that bad. Or I am so grateful that it could be so much worse.
Yeah.
Right? Where I don't think that's super helpful at a certain point.
Yeah. Did you ever feel kind of like resentful of your birth mother? Or was that something you kind of just were like, I don't even know what my feelings are. I'm just trying to manage like the expectations of me.
Yeah, I think it was like later in life, like when, like because we continued to have a relationship later.
Yeah.
I mean, she would sort of come and I was always like a tomboy growing up and she'd be like Latin culture, you look very feminine. Typically you're supposed
okay.
all these things. Yeah. And so just sort of like her going like, who is this child that is hers but not, and then trying to like buy me things or give me money so that I could look a certain way, and so then the not accepting how I was showing up in the world was really again tricky. And then so I have to change myself in order to please you, because I can see that you're in pain, processing things in a way that you're not okay, but if I change myself, then you'll be okay. Like that was a consistent theme.
So you're kind of just always managing to
Wow. Anyways.